Welcome to the Sort of Sure podcast, where doubt looms, fear whispers, and the only way forward is through. I'm Samar Carbo, and if you've ever felt like you're just sort of sure about what you're doing, you're not alone. This is where we face the uncertainty, push past the hesitation, and keep going anyway. So take a breath, step in, and let's move forward together. Welcome to the Sort of Sure podcast. I'm Samar Carbo, and I am here to guide you through this conversation with Kaylin. She is a brilliant friend of mine who has agreed to come on the podcast, and she has an awesome story of imposter syndrome in the workplace in corporate America. Let's have a listen.
A bit about myself is that I manage a team of instructional designers. So a group of 7 individuals who build corporate education for a mortgage servicing company. And essentially what the team is responsible for is all education enterprise-wide. So I joined the organization a few years ago, and in the first year I was fortunate enough to get promoted to be a team lead among the team. So going from individual contributor to senior, and then 2 years later, I'm now the supervisor. Taking those leaps has always been a huge challenge for me in terms of that imposter syndrome. Do I deserve a seat at this table? What if I fail? Those types of thoughts. But I think, upon reflection, it's mostly in my head. Of course, it's like the imposter syndrome, in the sense that just the thought that I cared. And this was the feedback my manager gave to me. Just caring about wanting to do a good job already puts me ahead of most other people. And being my own worst critic, especially if you want to do a good job and you have a strong work ethic, it's natural to kind of feel a little nervous at first, but it's okay. So I think having, as I went and asked questions and owned when I didn't know anything or know that specific answer, but I had a great team around me that was like, yeah, help me learn. And now I feel confident in my role. And it's interesting to look back on, where I was a year ago when I first got this supervisor position and how I felt about that, especially, having come from an individual contributor position.
So yeah, obviously a meteoric rise. Was there a moment when you said to yourself, this is imposter syndrome and I need to separate myself from it? Or did you just see it as kind of how you looked at yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like it was a bit of both. In general, I am my worst critic. I like to do a good job. My brain gives me happy signals when someone tells me that I've done a good job and that I've helped somebody out. So the idea of starting someplace new where I'm not as comfortable, there was that what if. And I think it took a couple of tries from my manager and also some of my peers of saying, like, no, we get it. We remember when we were in this position. It's okay. We understand. Having that safe space around them really made a huge difference. And that's when I was finally able to separate, like, okay, I'm still feeling insecure, still really do want the warm and fuzzies when my boss says I did a good job, but I also know that I'm putting this on myself. And that's when the imposter syndrome definition really hit.
So as you were kind of living in this moment, what was it you were telling yourself? Like, what was the story you were telling yourself about why you weren't enough in that moment?
I'm not sure if it was that I'm not enough as it was that I don't necessarily want to be enough. I strive to be a person that people can depend on, and I can take something new and you won't have to worry about it because our jobs are stressful in other ways. I don't want to add to that. So, I feel like I always recognized that the standard was not what I was holding myself to, but that fear of letting the others down and possibly disappointing them. That's when that little voice in my head was like, well, are you ready for this? Is this, who decided that you should manage 7 people? It's uncomfortable. I guess that means you're growing, right? So, just being able to reflect back on that has helped me kind of temper the feelings of imposter syndrome moving forward.
I love that. And I've been muting myself. I don't know if you noticed, in between talking, because I will just continuously interject otherwise. It's the thing I'm working on. But, I almost fell out of my chair, when you said, let me see, I wrote it down. I don't necessarily want to be enough. So to me, that says you were seeing where the standard could be, because you were seeing where you were, and you were saying, if this is enough, it shouldn't be. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yes.
That is so succinctly said. I've said hour-long talks that haven't been that impactful. That's so good to hear that. So when you were setting the tone for the office, did you have a point where you stopped holding yourself to such a high standard, or was it just that you keep holding yourself to a high standard? It's just that it's okay if you can't reach it.
I'd say definitely the latter. It's what I strive for, and I always, half jokingly say to both my business partners and those on my team is that I'm gonna ask these questions. I'm gonna poke, I'm gonna prod, I'm going to give my recommendation. And if you don't go with it, that's okay. But at least let us talk about it and figure out all of these different options and the impact. So yeah, it's just, I feel like, again, having that safe space with the business partners and with my team where I can tell them exactly how I'm feeling and they respect my opinion.
Have you noticed a pattern when this pops up for you? Like when you're particularly primed for imposter syndrome?
I think it is, typically it happens with, something that's very new. So take, for example, a high profile project. I've done other high profile projects before, but this one's different. And just with how I know, how things go at my company and, just the general process, things are always in flux. So in instances where I've already have like a pre-existing relationship with somebody or, all right, high profile, but I've got these other areas of comfort where I can say, all right, guys, this is how it is, and not worry about, oh, well, do they think I'm overstepping? Do they think who is this person? They know that I'm trying to help. Whereas, if it's, for example, I was asked to put together the education curriculum for the board of directors, and I've put together tons and tons and tons of curricula over my career, but this is the first time I had to do it for a board of directors. And the first time I presented the plan to the VP of HR, I was extremely nervous. I'm like, well, who am I to say what the board should take? But again, jumped in, owned it, got great feedback, was open to feedback. I've built that relationship with the board now. So yes, do I still get a little nervous when I get an email from one of the directors asking for something or asking for help? A little bit, but it also, instead of that imposter syndrome, it's now a point of pride where it's like, oh, I am that reliable person. And I don't have those insecurities as much.
Oh, that's great. And I find that question comes up a lot for people experiencing imposter syndrome on their own. It's that whole, who am I to do this? Well, the best possible person. Who you are, you're just not seeing it. Which of course you said yourself. So what was, because you mentioned that people rallied around you, you had that support from your peers and your bosses, but what was there a specific turning point where you started to kind of gain control over the doubt?
I don't know if there's a defined turning point, but definitely noticing eventually the absence of anxiety. I remember I would just start every day just constantly fretting about, oh, am I going to mess something up? Am I going to forget something? Is somebody, what do my peers think too? Because at that point I had gone from actually being, relatively on equal footing with them to now they report into me and I'm responsible for their performance reviews and the like. As we continued or as I got more comfortable, again, a lot of it was that seeking feedback. For me, no news is not necessarily good news. I need something to address that voice in my head of, okay, am I doing enough? So asking for feedback from my team, from my peers, from my business partners. How did this go? Is there anything you want to see different? What do you envision our relationship like? And again, being open to collaborating with the other people. And I feel like giving that vulnerability or openness to others makes them more open in return. And so you're more likely to get better results.
That's really good. Is there so you mentioned getting feedback from people around you. Is there like a more personal habit that you've put in place or anything like that? And of course, for all of these things, there's no right answer. Maybe it's not there. But if there is, separate from this, something you do by yourself, maybe before a call or something, a habit or a ritual that helped you out so that you feel empowered.
Yeah, I feel like, when those thoughts creep in, especially before a big call or before a big presentation, is reminding myself that I got here where I was because of my previous actions. The beautiful thing about being with a company for several years is that you've got an opportunity to file away a bunch of warm and fuzzies for yourself in case you need it. So I have a folder in my email and also in my my OneDrive, my work OneDrive, that is filled with feedback and recognition. And so the times that I've gotten a nice email or accolade from a senior leader or something that I want to remember, I tuck away in that folder. And being able to look back at that folder and saying, look at how, all of the things, it kind of forces you to recognize those accomplishments. And it forces me to remember, hey, no, yes, I want to do great things, but not shortchange myself in what I've already accomplished. So I highly recommend having a little sunshine folder of yourself.
That is truly wonderful. I didn't know that about you. I love that you're kind of squirreling away warm and fuzzies for the winter. Because it's almost like winter when you're in those feelings and you're kind of mired down. It's like things are frozen and there's tundra around you and you feel alone. And that's a great way to gather people around you when they're not there or may not be available. So it's super cool. So if someone listening feels like a fraud today, what is some advice that you have for them? So maybe they don't have the ability to get those tangible things in their email. What would you suggest for them?
I would say a couple of things. One is I've been a big list person when it comes to organizing my thoughts. And so when you have that little voice in your head that says, are you sure you're up to this? A couple questions that I ask myself are, what's the worst that could happen? And this is both in the okay, seriously though, what is the worst that could happen? Generally, the worst case scenario is that, a certain deliverable goes out late or something, it's relatively minor, honestly. Like with what I do, lives are not on the line. Remembering that the stakes are not nearly as high as what typically I build them up to be. And then the other side of it as well is, again, what is the worst that could happen? Well, realistically, you're putting yourself out there. You're showing people that you may not be 100% sure, but you're willing to try and you're willing to learn. And that is something that you can't teach that. It's either a person has that or they don't. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, what have I already done? Why am I here? Giving recognition to the things that you're proud of and that you have done, big and small. Sometimes I am excited that I showered. And you know what? That's okay. Just things that you are proud of yourself for doing and why you are in the position that you're in. They wouldn't have done this, or they meaning, promotion, special project, highlight. They wouldn't have done that unless they truly meant it. And so believe people when they do show those things.
Absolutely solid. So if I may, very, very, very quick summary. Almost not even what you said, but ask what's the worst that could happen, which for those who are in the Stoic world would call that negative visualization. Really helpful. And the second thing is essentially believe the hype about yourself. Mm-hmm. When people say good things, believe them, which is so difficult when you're in those hard times and doubting yourself and seeing the world as a place where you don't quite fit in, or maybe just a table, a place where you don't quite fit in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And this one, I don't ask this question a lot. I've never asked this question before, but this is only like the 4th episode. So there's a lot of questions I haven't asked before. But here's one. What is one thing that people tend to get wrong when they think about imposter syndrome?
I would venture to say, if I were a betting person, I feel like almost everybody experiences imposter syndrome at some level. You know, even celebrities have said, you know, sometimes they get starstruck by other celebrities. There is, as Qui-Gon Jinn said, there is always a bigger fish. So everybody else, you know, if there's somebody who intimidates you, you know, it's the board of directors or a VP or whomever, they get ready like the rest of us, or people like the rest of us. And they have people that when they interact with, perhaps they feel that same feeling too. So try not to be as hard on yourself. I know it's easier said than done, but imposter syndrome is more common than people think at the higher level. I went to a conference last fall, specifically for women, that did talk about this concept of imposter syndrome. And the biggest thing to remember about imposter syndrome is that it only hurts yourself. When you're feeling imposter syndrome, and if you give in to those feelings, you tend to self-select out, and deny yourself those opportunities for growth, for advancement, because you're afraid of that what if. So again, if you're concerned and you have the imposter syndrome because they wanted 10 things in this role and I only have 4 of them. Well, there's somebody out there that only has 1 or none of those things, and they're still going to go for it, and they're going to have gumption about it. So again, what's the worst that can happen? So I try to remember that every time I get that inkling, in that don't self-select out. The answer is always no unless you try. And if it doesn't quite work out, what's the worst that can happen? I'll try again. I'll try something different, and it'll be okay.
Oh, that's so good. I've often heard imposter syndrome stated as when you've done the work, but your brain tricks you into thinking you haven't. And that's one that I hold on to. But so much that self-selecting and removing yourself from a conversation where you absolutely belong. Absolutely in women's conferences, but it's an everybody thing. I think our society has a slant towards telling men to get over it, but then telling women to lean into it.
Right.
And it's this weird thing that we do that is honestly why I do what I do here, that I've, just started doing, to get people out of that and get us away from that stigma that says, you know, in some cases, you don't belong in rooms and to be afraid of that. Well, we all feel it. And this is why we do this. This is why we get on the phone and talk for a little bit, to tell people, hey, on your morning commute, we're all like this.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. I will let you get back to your evening. You're the best.
All right, my dear. I'll talk to you soon.
Looking forward to it. Bye.
Bye.
I want to thank Kaylin once again for being on the podcast. It is awesome to talk to friends, and it's even better when they can share amazing insights with my listening audience. Folks, we have already passed the top 50% of podcasts downloads, so this is episode 4, so I'm really excited about that. Just a quick recap here. I fully recommend trying out negative visualization. It helps for those who really want to work that system. And believe the hype. You are not in a vacuum. Other people observe you. If somebody believes in you and that's all you got, hang on to that until you can stand up on your own and you can be the leader that you know you can. So that's it for me today. I am so glad you joined me for this journey. Check us out next week for a conversation with Joey Chandler, a coach friend of mine who is very capable in this area, who's going to give us some tips. If you have a story that you'd like to share, go ahead and reach out to me on sortofsurepod@gmail.com. That's sortofsurepod@gmail.com. I'd be so happy to hear from you. We can schedule an interview on the air, or you can just share your story, and I'd be happy to read it for you on the air. You never know who might need your story to get to the next day. Later days.